Welcome to another Monday Morning Pastor, where we look at some of the stuff we talked about on Sunday and apply it to our lives. And on Sunday morning, we talked about power couples. I think most of us know what a power couple is. Let me read a quick definition. A power couple consists of two people who are each influential and successful in their own right. Let me read that again. Power couples consist of two people who are each influential and successful in their own right. And I've added this, and are more so as a couple. I tend to believe in the Christian church realm that God brings people together, married couples, to increase their effectiveness. So they are more effective as a couple than they are as two individuals. And so I asked the congregation to name some power couples, and some of the names that came out, of course, Bill and Hillary, Barack and Michelle. I threw out one of my favorites, Sonny and Cher. Maybe not Sonny and Cher, but going back to the previous two couples, I would suggest of those two couples, each of the husbands was a president at one time, that perhaps Hillary has a little more to her name, having been elected a United States Senator from the state of New York, and also having been Secretary of State and running for President of the United States. So Michelle probably doesn't quite have the same influence or success story yet, but her final chapter has not been written. Sonny and Cher, I just kind of like them, as I kind of always like the song and the beat goes on. So now in the church realm, I think in the Bible, in the New Testament particularly, there is only one power couple that I could think of. Again, their names are Priscilla and Aquila. We learn about them first in Acts chapter 18. We don't know a whole lot about them, and a little bit of what I'm going to share today is speculation. It's likely they didn't have kids. If they did have kids, they were growing up, because we look at their ministry and lifestyle and traveling. It's a little bit difficult to imagine children in tow, but it is possible. But from the lives of Priscilla and Aquila, I think we can come up with at least 8 characteristics of a true, dynamic, effective Christian power couple. So let's briefly go through those 8 characteristics together. The first thing to note is that this couple worked well with other people. They were team players. They didn't have big egos. Paul uses this wonderful phrase to describe them. He calls them in Romans chapter 16, fellow workers. They worked great with Paul. They likely worked well with others, and that's probably the primary skill set that they had to make them a power couple. They were able to work with other people. Number 2 is that they were able to overcome adversity. Do you know how they met Paul in Corinth? That's where they met. They had been kicked out of their home city of Rome by an Emperor Claudius Caesar, in about AD 49. All the Jews were kicked out of Rome by the emperor, and they scattered everywhere. And this couple ended up in Corinth. They were tent makers. That was their occupation. And Paul was also a tent maker. By the way, that's where we get the phrase tent making ministry. People who do something besides ministry, preaching, teaching, evangelism, to support themselves. Paul did that. This couple did that, and they met Paul in Corinth because they were booted out of Rome. So they were able to overcome adversity, and there are all sorts of adversity that comes to people, Christians, especially to families. You might get dislocated, uprooted from your own town. Maybe not because of an egomaniac Caesar, but maybe the economy, or maybe jobs, or something like that. You have to leave your home and go somewhere else. That's a type of adversity. Losing a job, losing a family member, all sorts of adversity can come our way, and does come our way. But this couple showed that even though they had been kicked out of their homes, that they were able to overcome. So being able to overcome adversity is another prerequisite to being a power couple. Number 3, they were flexible and adaptable. Again, they were from Rome. They met Paul in Corinth and stayed there for about a year and a half at least with Paul. And then eventually they traveled with Paul to go to Ephesus. So this couple had to be flexible and adaptable, not rigid and stubborn to be effective as a power couple. Characteristic number 4 is that they were generous and hospitable. Generous and hospitable. We believe that Paul stayed with them in Corinth. Paul lived with them. And then Paul, this family, this couple, when they eventually made their way to Ephesus and there is a church started there, they hosted the church. The church met in their home. The scriptures tell us, can you imagine that, having a church meet in your home? Maybe not just every week, but maybe on a regular, more daily basis to gather together. That takes a lot of generosity. That takes a lot of hospitality. And I would suggest a New Testament church power couple is both generous and hospitable. The 5th characteristic of this power couple is that they were smart. They were smart biblically, theologically, intellectually, and we know that because later on in the book of Acts, toward the end of Acts chapter 18, there is this heavyweight theological giant named Apollos. I think anybody with the name Apollos is going to be a giant in some way. This guy was smart. He was a great Bible teacher. He was a leader in the church, but he had a theological deficiency. And it says that it was Priscilla and Aquila that took him aside and instructed him so that he would be more fully able to share and teach the gospel. So the fact that they're teaching this heavyweight, Apollos, tells us that Priscilla and Aquila were quite intelligent. Number 6 is that they worked hard as a team. They were a team together. They had a business together, fixing and making tents. They worked that together. They probably taught together. They served together. They certainly traveled together. They worked together as a team, and they focused on their relationship. I suspect in order to be effective as a power couple in the church Christian realm, they had to have been strong in their personal relationship with each other. Characteristic number 7, they took risks. They took risks. In fact, in Romans chapter 16, Paul tells us that this couple, Priscilla and Aquila, risked their lives for Paul. We don't know exactly what happened, but they did something that put themselves at risk, their very lives at risk, for the sake of Paul. So this couple, this power couple, they were willing to take risks, significant risks for other people and for the kingdom of God. And finally, I want to share something that might to some be a little controversial, but it is this, that Aquila, supported her and her strengths and was comfortable with her sometimes leading and being up front or out front. Every time I've mentioned their names, I say Priscilla and Aquila, because for the most part, that is the order of names listed in the Bible, except for one time they are named as Priscilla and Aquila. The wife's name is first and the husband's second. That is unheard of, even today. Think about your own relationship. If you're married, people usually say John and Diane, not necessarily Diane and John, although there's nothing wrong with that. Usually back in that culture, back in that heavily patriarchal and sexist culture, the man's name was named first. In this case, it's the other way around. Priscilla is almost always listed first, Priscilla and Aquila. Why is that? We're only guessing here, but likely she was probably the better communicator, the better teacher, the better one at explaining things. And it was probably she, along with Aquila, explained things to Apollos. Because of her natural gifts and skills, and again, reading into this a bit here, we're just guessing a bit that she may have been the more theological one. Some have suggested that she was the author of the only book in the New Testament that is basically anonymous. One book of all the books in the New Testament is still pretty much anonymous. It's the book of Hebrews. Some people think Paul wrote the book of Hebrews, but it's so different than all his other 13 letters. It's very doubtful. Other people have been suggested, like Barnabas, but some make the case that it was Priscilla, and her name was intentionally left out for the simple reason that during that sexist time, more people would listen to the message of Hebrews if they didn't think that it was a woman behind the authorship. Clearly she was gifted. There is a reason she was always named first. She probably stood out. And by the way, we see that all the time anyway. Don't we know of couples where one person or the other sort of seems to be the better at communicating, the one that's teaching, the one that's speaking forth the words of truth? Doesn't matter, doesn't mean the other one's any less smart. It just means that one person seems to have speaking gifts more than the other. I suspect that was true with Priscilla. And at the same time, Aquila, her husband, I suspect was very supportive of that. So that's the principle, is we are each supportive of the strengths of our spouse. Understand that? A power couple is a couple where they are each affirming the strengths of each other and not judging the other because they might lack certain skills or gifts. So there you have it. 8 different characteristics of biblical New Testament power couples. How do you fit in, and what are you going to do to go forth to make your marriage, make your relationship a power couple in order to build the kingdom of God and to strengthen the church? Thank you for watching and listening, and have a great day.